Anger is the fuel. Anger is the kerosene that gets poured on the divorce fire that lets it continue to burn. And really, in all cases, you're getting a divorce. A divorce, by its very definition, is the end of something. It's the end of a
Mhm.
marriage. So therefore, you need to have that chapter end before a new chapter can begin.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I am passionate about helping others reclaim their stories so they can live their most beautiful future. Now, sometimes reclaiming your story involves big life changes like separation and divorce. Joe Dillon, co-founder of Equitable Mediation Services, is here today to share his insights on mediation and conflict resolution in the setting of a divorce and what we can learn from approaching conflict, not with a win-lose approach, but a cooperative approach whenever possible. Joe Dillon is passionate about combining his MBA in finance and studies at institutions like Harvard and Northwestern to guide families through the financial and emotional complexities of separation and divorce. And we are grateful that he's here to share his expertise with us today. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Shafer. I appreciate it.
I am so looking forward to this conversation because I think it is so important. And I want to start off for everyone who's listening at home on the foot of making sure that we are showing up, letting go of shame. Divorce is an extremely painful experience. And for many of our listeners who have gone through a divorce, they may have painful feelings that come up in the
Yep.
process.
Yep.
And so the reality is that 50% of marriages end in divorce. We all experience conflict during our lives, whether or not we have gone through a divorce. And the art of conflict resolution, negotiation, and cooperation are important skills for all of us to learn. What inspired you, Joe, to pursue mediation as a career and to share your approach to mediation with others so that they too can learn these skills, avoid potentially expensive legal situations, and excessive stress during the dissolution of a marriage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as a physician or anyone who is a therapist will certainly have a field day with my answer. And I've come to terms with that. So I am an only child and I am the child of a litigated divorce. So I am the person who, when you see on the TV or in the movies, and there's all those stories about how, oh, that'll never happen with our divorce. Yes, it will. It can. And I was the child who sat in the back of the courtroom and, watched my parents up there at the whatever the benches are facing the judge. And, back in the 80s when we didn't have really mediation and all divorces were handled by attorneys through an adversarial court process, that's not how you want to spend your teenage years. You had to wear a suit, and what teenage boy wants to get a haircut, put on a tie, sit in the back of a courtroom, right? That's not how you want to be out with your friends, playing sports, listening to music, driving your car, doing your things. And as the years went by, it's funny, I spent my time in corporate in finance. I have an MBA in finance and my background is in negotiation, contract negotiation. And so I would help negotiate a lot of large financial contracts for publishing companies. And as the years went by and I was more and more in corporations, I thought to myself, maybe my wife was self-employed and she said, you could do something on your own. Maybe you want to strike out on your own. And I had really no idea of what it was I would do. So I'm having lunch with my mother-in-law of all people, and she says, you would be a good mediator. And I'm like, what's that? Back in the 2000, early 2000s. And she said, well, I have a friend who's a mediator for the Jersey City Police Department, so up and outside of New York City. And she's the one that you see on the news where the contract at the 11th hour, they've got the coffee going and, they've got to come to terms before they go on strike. And she was this person in the middle of this conflict. And I said to myself, I'm like, that looks really interesting. So I thought about what kind of mediator would I like to be? And then given my background as a child of divorce, I said, divorce mediation would be perfect for me because let's be honest, a divorce is a financial contract with a parenting component, right? Three of the four: child support, alimony, property division. Now you've got parenting in there as well. But in certain states like New Jersey, like Pennsylvania, like California, the number of overnights, the parenting plan, is a direct input into calculating child support. So three and a half of the four topics in a divorce are financial in nature. And given my background, I can truly lend, some credibility when I look at clients and I say, listen, look at my face. You're on a dangerous path. You don't want your kids to be me, right? So if I can use that pain and I can use that story to help them avoid going in that direction that my folks did, I'm all for it. And that's really what I think has helped me throughout my career. It brings some credibility, but it also is a bit therapeutic for me because I get to sort of undo past wrongs. And there are
Mm.
times, where I've sat down and I've said, and I love my wife. She's very supportive. She's my partner here. She's our divorce coach. And she says, I always say, gee, when I finish with a client, I go, good job, Joe. You just ended another marriage. Nice going. And she's like, no, 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 no. She's like, hold on, time out. She's like, these people were going to get a divorce and you helped them avoid that litigious knockdown, drag out, and you saved their kids and their family. And so now that's how I've started thinking about it is that, the whole like you throw a stone in the pond and all the ripples that go out, right? And that's really how I think about it. I'm like, well, if this client couple can model good behavior, then their kids are going to see that. And even if they have conflict in the future, they'll be able to handle it more cooperatively and so on and so forth. So I think about all the thousands of people that I've had the privilege to work with and the lives that I've impacted. And that's what actually lets me sleep at night, quite frankly, because it is hard. You are carrying a lot of this. People don't realize that as a mediator, you carry the burden of two people and their family, right? As a lawyer, you're advocating. Your job is to fight. As a mediator, your job is to care. And it's hard because you run into a lot of nice people in terrible situations. So that's really as the windy road brought me here. And when I look back, I go, "Oh, yeah, this makes perfect sense why I'm doing this now." So that's what I'll say to that excellent question.
It's a fascinating answer, and there are so many different roads we could go down with fascinating conversations. It's hard to even know where to start. It's fascinating, and I love the work
Yeah,
you're doing. I want to comment on something before we break down really what mediation is from a
sure.
definition standpoint. But I want to take a pause because I think it's a great thing that you're doing with how you structure your mediation services to have a
Hmm.
divorce coach
Yeah.
involved,
Yep.
especially, your wife and her skills, because I think a lot of people do get emotionally involved and end up kind of dragging out and extending the bounds of their litigation regarding a separation and divorce, in part because they don't have that support and that coaching, and they
Right.
seek it from their counsel because they think that's a part of it and they don't have someone else.
Right. Absolutely. And I have good friends who are lawyers. Whenever they get into a situation like that, we not joke, ha ha, funny, but we look at each other and we're like, nowhere on the wall is there a diploma that says, PhD, or PsyD or, doctor of psychology or anything, right? It's just like we are woefully underqualified, right? And we say it right up front. We're like, listen, I'm an amazing mediator. I'm a great finance professional. This person's a great lawyer. We're not mental health professionals, and you don't want to use this that way. You want to speak to someone who is trained as a coach, as a therapist, because those are different modalities. Now we have to in mediation, of course, speak that language at a very high level, right? We need to be emotionally intelligent, engaged, acknowledge, validate, those kinds of things. But my wife, Cheryl, who's my partner here and our divorce coach, she helps really temper those emotions, help people process them, help them prepare to have more productive negotiations because anger is the fuel. Anger is the kerosene that gets poured on the divorce fire that lets it continue to burn. And sometimes you just have to say, and really in all cases, you're getting a divorce. A divorce by its very definition is the end of something. It's the end of a
Mm.
marriage. So therefore, you need to have that chapter end before a new chapter can begin. And I don't know how many years any of us have on this planet. However, whatever years I have and whatever years you have and everyone else who's listening out there, I hope for you and for me and for everyone else that those years are filled with joy and wonder and productivity, if you want, and happiness and love and romance. And if this chapter is ending, it's terrible, it's sad. I'm not discounting that by any stretch, but there is a healing process that's going to need to begin. And the sooner you get to that, the sooner you can heal, get to the other side of that mountain and say, okay, there's sunshine in this valley. I guess I can keep marching forward. And so Cheryl helps our clients kind of reconcile those emotions so that they can move forward and move through this process, which is a huge help for me personally.
Yeah, that's wonderful because it says, this isn't the last chapter of your story, right?
Right.
This chapter happened, but now it's time to write the next one. And the next one might be that messy middle, right? We're still healing, we're
Sure.
learning. And I think it's really interesting because when you go to the wrong source with your emotions, with your grievances, for example,
Hmm.
if you go to your doctor and you complain of something, right? We
Right.
call it the chief complaint. There is some assumption there. So you want me to do something about that.
Right.
Right. And so you might end up with investigation that takes your time, your resources, your money, perhaps discomfort, blood
Hmm.
test, MRI,
Sure.
whatever it is,
Right.
because you
Right.
come to me with a complaint.
Right.
And that's my job too. You've come to me with a complaint. So now I will investigate this. And the same with your attorney. If you come to them with a complaint, they will often say, okay, well, I, as an attorney, these are the tools I have. I can
Right.
file a motion. And
Right.
so, knowing that's one thing I really wanted to get your expert opinion on during our discussion today is knowing what are your other tools when you are in this difficult chapter. How can you best prepare yourself to have it go as smoothly as possible given the circumstances? Question some people may have. I was a child of the 80s. My parents divorced in the 80s.
Me too. Yeah.
My heart, by the way, just breaks thinking about you in that courtroom because now I think because of the best interests of children, we wouldn't have a child, I would hope
Yeah. Yeah.
in that courtroom witnessing that. But having seen that, for people who went through that as kids, so they don't know what mediation is, what is a mediator and what value do they bring to the divorce process?
All right. So a mediator, I can speak from my perspective, right, is a neutral third party. They come from a variety of backgrounds. Like there's mediation for everything, but specifically my world is divorce mediation. And it's common for lawyers, mental health professionals to be divorce mediators. Finance professionals are a little bit of an unusual animal, although I would think, I've always encouraged more people who with finance backgrounds to get into divorce mediation, given the nature, as we shared, about the three of the four topics being financial. When we think about a mediator, their job is not to judge, their job is not to decide. Their job is to facilitate conversations, it's to bring options to the table, it's to help parties engage in creative thinking, and it's also to help them communicate more effectively. A lot of times in a divorce, and a lot of times in many relationships, think about a friend you have, think about a relative you have. There are individuals that we simply don't get along with. We simply don't want to spend time with. Why is that? Because we argue with them all the time. Every time we talk to them, it's an argument. Why? Their communication styles may not match. And I think that's probably the number one job I have is to get them to understand that they have common goals, find their shared interests, right? Their shared interests are perhaps make sure our kids don't become the economic victims of our divorce. Make sure both of us can retire at a reasonable age. Make sure we don't sell the house for less than we want to sell it. They have a lot more in common than they think. But when they're in a divorce and they're in that situation, they fail to see that a lot. My job is to bring those to the surface, get them to focus on them, guide them through everything, all the steps they need to get to the divorce process, and then help them come out the other side. So we wear a lot of hats. We're part counselor, part financial professional, part legal professional, part communication specialist. Sometimes you're part cheerleader, right? You're just like, you guys can do this. Come on, we're so close to agreement. It's like you've got all these roles and you're just trying to get them to the place. Because as a child of divorce and even just knowing what litigation is in general, you don't have to be a child of divorce to know that. You just know that that's not a path you want to go down. You don't want to spend $100,000, $200,000 on lawyers who are fighting over things that, guess what? You could have resolved on your own for a fraction of that and the time and money, right? So that's what I'm trying to do is really help them understand they have a choice. I can help them do what they need to do, help them move forward and not create all the collateral financial and emotional damage that a litigated divorce or even an attorney driven. That doesn't even have to go to court, right? It can be even attorney driven through their best interest, right? Some attorneys, they're advocates, as we were just talking about. You've said something to me. Okay, I guess you want me to do something about it. And sometimes when you pull the pin out of that grenade, there's no putting it back in. and then off to the races you go. And unfortunately, that's where we see a lot of people wind up down that path. And there's just no coming back from it, unfortunately, once that horse has left the barn, as they say.
Yeah, it definitely can escalate. I think it's interesting though, because I do think with a good mediator like yourself, I've utilized a mediator who also was extremely skilled at what he did. I would say it's never too late because
Yeah.
sometimes it can feel
Yeah.
too late. But
Yeah.
I think something that's so important in conflict, which you manage every single day, is to, if things are escalating, to understand that if they're escalating and you meet them, you're inviting the next step up, right?
Right.
Sometimes when someone's yelling at us, we're like, "Oh, I need to take the power back." But
Hmm.
instead, you're just escalating rather than I can take control over what I'm bringing to the temperature of the situation. I can
Absolutely.
talk to my lawyer about, I'd actually like another session with the mediator if you think that's something that's helpful. So I think that's important too for people's mental health to just say like, hey, things might not be going okay right now. Things might have escalated. You can take a step back. So I think that's really important. And if you are feeling like you are in a battle, as unfortunately, and it's really unhealthy for us, and divorce
Hmm.
can impact our health and our mental health in significant ways,
Sure.
especially when we're in that warfare mindset. How can listeners who are facing an imminent separation and divorce embrace a mindset that will help them focus on, whenever possible, a more equitable, timely, and respectful dissolution of the marriage? How can they take the reins back?
That is the $1 million question. And the answer is a simple one, and it's one that a lot of people don't want to hear. I'll couch it this way so that it doesn't come across as too harsh. But growing up as a kid, what did we do? We had summers off from school. We got to laze around. We'd play with our friends, right? Maybe we had to clean our room. We had some chores or something we did, right? Our life was pretty simple. We didn't really have a lot of choices, right? Our parents told us what to eat your vegetables, go to bed, do your homework. A lot of that stuff was structured. Now that you're an adult, all the choices are yours. 100% of the decisions you make fall squarely on your shoulders. And it's been my experience that people don't like to hear that. You have a choice in how your divorce goes. You can choose the more peaceful, cost effective, and quite frankly, mature path of mediation, where you say, I had a hand in this marriage going south, and therefore I want to have a hand in making sure the divorce doesn't go south. And I want to have control over the outcome of this rather than leaving it to a stranger. I want to be mature enough that I could sit in the same room, or like we practice completely via Zoom. So I want to be able to be on a Zoom call with my soon to be ex and be mature enough that I can communicate to them directly. I might not be, 100%, feeling it from them, but at least I can, keep myself together versus the, I don't want to deal with that. Somebody else should handle it. Leave me alone. Leave me out of it. And then that's when things really get out of control. And when you say to people, listen, it's a choice. It's entirely up to the two of you. And as you said, Dr. Shafer, we have had clients where you'll see the intake, we have an intake when before they meet with me, and we'll ask them, where are you in the divorce process? And they'll both be like, we're both actively litigating or something, right? And not too many people have the emotional maturity to be in that space and then become clients of ours. They'll come in, they'll still think, nah, I don't want to do this. I'm going to just let somebody else handle it. And that's such a mistake, such a big mistake. And I'll end my answer with this one nugget, which I think is really going to flip over everybody's apple cart. If you're thinking about a divorce, when you think about how divorce, now I'm not a lawyer. I want to be real clear on that, right? So I'm not talking about the law and things like that. However, of course, I need to be familiar with how divorce works in various states because we practice in multiple states. However, there is a misconception that there is some magic rule book out there. We flip to page 1114 and it goes, look, because we've been married this long and you make this and I make this, I get the house and you get this. No, everything are guidelines, recommendation, statutes. They're all these very generic sort of wide open kind of things left to interpretation. And so do I say to clients, I'm like, listen, we can interpret them here in mediation and we can decide what they mean and come to an agreement we, the two of you really, want. Or you can let a stranger, judge, third party, interpret what they think it means, and then they will, rule down upon you. And that's the mistake. People don't understand. They are completely in control of the decision on how they go through the process, as well as what their settlement looks like. And that is the thing I'd want everybody listening to know, is that you have control over it all. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
So have the mindset going into mediation that you have autonomy and you have control, and
Yep.
focus on that instead of getting lost in the things that you're going to have to not give up, but be equitable about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you have to know that nobody walks away with 100% of everything. That just doesn't make any sense. And you'd have to understand that in a negotiation, and we use what we call interest-based negotiation. Now, when that's the opposite is what we call positional. So positional is, I want the TV remote. No, I want it. No, I want it, right? It's just your yes, no, yes, no. Versus, hey, let's both find something that we'd like to watch together, right? That's why we want the remote, because we want to choose the program. So we move deeper and we say, well, let's watch this. Great, that looks good. And we can decide. In our job in mediation is to find those interests and help people focus on those, because when you do, the quote unquote loss of something doesn't feel as bad, because you're achieving your stated goal, you're achieving your stated intention. And that's really what we want you to focus on, is that if you want your kids, for example, not to have to change schools, then that might mean that one of you stays in the house with them and one of you gets an apartment. That's what it might mean. It doesn't mean that you're going to get to keep the house or keep all the proceeds, or, oh, you're a terrible person because we're asking you to move out. It just means this is what we've got right now, and let's just focus on what's the best interest, for example, for the kids in this example. So that's where you really need to get people focused away from the positional, I gave you this, I lost that, I gave up this. It's like, no, what have you achieved? What are the goals of this process? And that's how we get them through mediation.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have to give up furniture, but you're getting a different monetary amount.
Sure.
I've heard lawyers say you can buy new furniture because
Right.
it's so easy to get attached to, I bought that furniture, right?
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
easy to lose energy and lose focus
Hmm.
on those items. But what you're saying is try to stay focused. I want to know from your experience, and I've heard that you have something like a 98%
We
success
do,
rate,
which
which
is
is
interesting.
incredible. It's incredible. It
Yeah.
speaks so much to your craft and your expertise. But so maybe this isn't that it's going to fail eventually, but maybe just for the moment, when do you know when you're in a mediation that things are falling apart and you need to either pause or reset completely and come back to it another day?
Yeah, it's very obvious to a professional, like as myself as an observer. My job, of course, also is to study. I'm kind of this watcher floating above, right? I'm watching the interactions of the parties and I'm checking the body language, and you can hear the escalation of the vocals, the words, the cutting off, those kinds of things. And that's the mistake that a lot of people make. Heck, we make it in our own relationships, right? I'm guilty of this. So my wife and I, we come from different backgrounds. I'm an only child. For me, like, and my parents, when they would fight and they would stay silent for months, literally months. They wouldn't talk to each other. So as an adult, of course, I want to resolve conflict right now, right? If there's a problem, we need to fix it this second. And so I look at couples, and when you see that, you can see that dynamic. And sometimes you can see that this conversation isn't going to go anywhere, and it might actually harm us. And one of the things that we do just as part of our process is we offer clients a flat fee mediation, but we do not limit the number of sessions you can have with us, which is probably a bad business decision, but we'll get into that some other day. But what we say to them is, we said, we don't want you to have the pressure of going, oh my God, we only have one session left with this guy. We only have an hour with this guy, or he's billing me by the hour. It's like, we want you to have the conversations that are natural. And if an hour and 5 minutes go by and we go, you know what? Let's call it. I think we made some good progress. Or you want to go 2 hours? You want to go, let's do it. and that's what helps. So it's being attuned to the parties, listening to the language, the tenor of it, the volume of it, the agitation level, the focus level. And that's where, as a mediator and in our process, what's helpful is to say, you know what, guys, no worries. We did great today. Let's call it a win, because you want to stack wins. That's what you want in mediation. And that's what gets us to that rate, is to say, look, you guys, I know we didn't go the full distance. We didn't do our full session last time, but check it out. We did come up with both a holiday parenting plan and a vacation plan. That's better than where we were at the start of that session, right? So when people start looking at that, because probably what's happened is over the years, they feel like their marriage has failed, that they've had a lot of disagreements, that they've had a lot of areas where they haven't had success as a couple. And for you, as the cheerleader mediator, get to say, you know what? You guys can do this. Look, you took a really difficult thing, a parenting plan, which is hard to agree on, and you did it. So let's keep that momentum going, and let's talk about child support now, and let's carry that forward. And they look at you at first, they kind of look at you like, I don't know about this guy, right? But I'm okay. I'm shameless. If I can get you to agreement, I'm happy to play the fool, whatever it is. But then after a while, they're like, huh. And I'm like, look at that, you guys. You got to the end of the process. Imagine that. And that's part of it. And as you mentioned, our case resolution rate, like industry average is around 70, so 70%. And we're proud of that. And I, quite frankly, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I will use it as a tool. And I'm like, I've lost 5 clients in my entire career. Please do not be number 6. I will be very upset with you. And it's the humor as well, right? It kind of diffuses the situation. And one of them is like, no, I'm like, so you can use whatever tools you have at your disposal. And sometimes humanity is a tool. And I think in the legal profession, that is lost. That these are people in pain, they're suffering, they're hurt, they want to lash out. And sometimes they just need a hug. They just need a virtual hug, like you okay? Like, how are you today? Like, and because no one's probably asked them that for years. And sometimes you'll get a flood and there'll be a conversation and then they'll apologize. And I'm like, what are you apologizing for? If they're crying or they're upset, I'm like, you're a human being. And if you weren't upset, I would be a little concerned, right? So, yeah, so that's a whole part of it, right? It's a all part of the whole process.
I appreciate your approach so much. And I think people who are listening who've been through a divorce are probably thinking, I wish I had that empathetic approach and ear when I was going through this. It's important to know that it exists and there's a different way.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of something that you and I were discussing off camera, how you live and you practice. In part, you practice in multiple states, but in part in
Yep.
Southern California.
Yep.
You also are from and have lived on the East Coast and in the Midwest and big
Yeah.
cities. And something that those of us who have lived on the East Coast would often say about our good old New Yorkers, I went to NYU, you live nearby as well, and near Manhattan, is that we're, New Yorkers, kind, not
Yep.
nice, right? Don't expect us to waste your time and your money, right? When we're thinking about the legal world, whoo, time is money. It's really expensive. They're not going to waste your time being nice. They're going to be kind to you. And what that translates to is they will tell you what you need to hear,
Right.
even if it's different than what you want to hear. I think it's
Exactly.
so many people have gone through divorce in our lives that when we need support and are going through divorce, it is so common to talk to your cousin, talk to your parents, talk to your neighbor, your friend at
Oh,
work, and they may give you advice, or they may, in trying to connect with you, they may increase the volume on that toaster that you two are fighting over because you picked out the toaster. Of course, you should get the toaster.
right.
And
Right.
then next thing you know, you've spent $2,000 fighting over a toaster that
Exactly.
you could replace for $20. So I think
Hmm.
as much as sometimes when someone is kind to us, it can feel not very nice. Someone in your position, when you say, no, we need to shift our focus. This is hard. I hear you. You're having a human moment. I see that.
Right.
I want to take this moment to have you reconsider something and maybe consider shifting your focus. The
Hmm.
kindness in that moment that could save you time and money and
Hmm.
energy and
Right.
teach you skills that are translatable outside of your divorce when you're looking at conflict and choices in life in the future.
Right.
It is so kind.
Yep. And we had one of my colleagues, and was an instructor of mine at Northwestern. She was a mental health professional, and she taught me a great line. And she said, when you get into a client situation where this is going round and round, she looks at them, and she wore glasses, so she would like take her glasses off for dramatic effect, chew on the arm kind of a thing, like in the movies. And she's like, this sounds like an old argument. How has it been working out for you? And it's
Mm,
such a therapist thing to say, right? And at first it's awkward as a not non-therapist to say something like that. But it really does speak to a powerful thing, is that this is a pattern. You're so looped into that pattern, you client couple, that you don't realize you're in it. Outside observer alien person comes hovering above and goes, this sounds like an old argument. It obviously hadn't worked for you because it got you to my office, virtual office, as a divorce mediator. So why don't we shift the perspective here? Why don't we try to flip this apple cart? And why don't we try to look at this from a different perspective? Sometimes people are so attached to their story, their victim story, that they want you to feel their pain, that they want you to hurt with them. And it's like, I will hurt for you, I will hurt around you, but I can never feel what you feel because I'm not you. And I'm not discounting how you feel by any stretch. But what I am saying is that that story is going to keep you planted where you are. And where you are right now hurts. It sucks. I really want to be in this place for the rest of your life. And no, I mean, you might not see that now, but I can tell you as a person, as a human who would care about you, this is not a space you want to be stuck in, this infinite loop of arguing. And the sooner we get
mm,
you this, and the sooner we give you some tough love and say, let's help you work through this, either through mediation or with a divorce coach or with a therapist or with someone who is a professional. Your friends and family are great, but as you said, Dr. Shafer, they are a mediator's worst nightmare. Worst nightmare. Because you can tell when they came back in from last week to this week to last week, and they've got some new spring in their step, and they're going to tell you some things, and then you hear the magic word like, well, I am entitled to. That's my favorite phrase. And that's the newsflash, is no one in a divorce is really entitled to anything because the laws aren't set up that way. They're laws of equity, they're laws of fairness. What does that mean? Like it's like that means somebody's been talking to their college roommate or their friend or their neighbor or their mother-in-law, and you're just like, oh boy, this is going to be a troubling situation that we found ourselves
okay, so I think we've learned a lot about trusting our mediator, one, enlisting a mediator, trusting them, considering other resources we can do. Now, if you're in mediation and you do feel like you're stuck in a loop and you're doing the self-reflection, okay, am I too focused on things that are stuck in the now when I need to be future focused? Okay, if you're doing that work and that's not the problem, but you do have one partner that you've identified is very coercively controlling, and that's a pattern that's well known to the other party, right? And they're coming in with their own baggage of how they have coped throughout the relationship with that and how that colors your mediation efforts. Now, how do you, as a mediator, work with the parties to resolve that, to keep it fair, equitable, to make sure nobody likes you more than the other person? Like you said, that's how you know you did a great job, is
right.
if nobody is your best buddy
Nobody
afterwards
likes
or
me. Yeah.
both a little annoyed. How do you do that so you can move forward when you have one person that's kind of trying to hold on to everything until their hands are bleeding?
Yeah. So as a neutral third party, that's your greatest superpower. There's two things you can do. So the first, of course, when you're talking to people, actually there's three that I'll bring in. And the first is the most important in terms of these three. And we tell clients, I have a slide I put up on the screen at the very beginning, and it talks about the differences between mediation and blank. So I have one that compares mediation and therapy, right? So mediation, we say, is a forward-looking process. It's here to be solutions oriented. It's got to be based on, mutual trust, communication, respect. therapy is reverse looking. Usually, if a person went to therapy, they can go by themselves. Me, I only work one on two, right? There's a lot of differences. So the first thing we say is mediation is a forward looking process. So what that gives me as the mediator, it gives me permission to say, you know what, you guys, I'm not saying that what you either of you are telling me is untrue. I wasn't there. I wasn't in your living room when this argument happened, right? I didn't know whose family you went to on Thanksgiving and why the other person was mad about that, right? And this is where the difference between kind and nice, and that's where I say, and guess what? It doesn't concern me. It's not that I don't care about you as people, but I don't care as a mediator because where you went on Thanksgiving 16 years ago does not influence what we're talking about right. So that's number one, right? Forward looking process. Number two is the classic communication style acknowledge and validate. When you acknowledge and validate someone, you don't necessarily have to agree with them. Someone could say to you, X, Y, X, Y, X, da, 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 and I can go, wow, that must have been really hard for you. And the person hears that as this guy's on my side. Listen to that statement carefully, right? That must have been really hard for you. Never did I say, oh, you're right. She's such a jerk. He's such a jerk. Never said that. Never I said, you're right. Oh, yeah, let's get on this, right? No, 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 no. I'm acknowledging your pain. I hear it. I feel it because it's coming off you and it must be hard for you. And then that helps that person, it really was. And thanks for saying that. And it gives them a little more room to communicate, right? And that opens it up. The third thing then so we've got the forward looking, right? So we've got to put that in our mind as anyone going into the divorce process, forward looking. Second, mediator's not there to take your side, but as the mediator, acknowledging and validating. And then the third is what I was saying to you before we jumped on is what I call the detached engagement, where I can say to people, and I've been mediating for 28 years, and I can say to people, again, kind, not nice. You can look at somebody and go, well, that's odd. I mean, I have no reason to disbelieve you, but in my 28 years of practicing and helping, tens of thousands of people, I've never heard anyone get 100% of all the assets and the other person have all the debts. But, maybe that's a possibility, but, in my professional experience of 28 years, never seen it, right? So it's your way of saying, yeah, I don't think so, right? But not inflaming the situation. And when you do that as a mediator enough, you're reinforcing the message to the other party who perhaps is more the aggressor that you're not going to get away with that in here because there's somebody who sees through you, but isn't going out and saying you're full of you know, blank, right? You're just continuing to go, that seems strange. Oh, that's odd. That's peculiar. Never heard that. You sure? Who told you that? Hey, you know what? I'm always open to learning something new. Next time when you come in, do me a favor, print out the statute that you read that says that you get all the stuff. I would love to add it to my toolkit and I'd love to learn more about it. And you're almost in a way, you're bordering a little bit, unfortunately, on snarky or sarcastic, and you got to be really careful, right? You're not trying to inflame the situation, but you're really just calling the person out and saying, if you're so certain of this, I'm not going to listen to hearsay because that's what arguments in marriages tend to, you always do that. Does someone always leave their coat on the floor 100% of the time? No, right? So those are the things we're looking for. So you think of those three things as someone entering that process. If you're going to work with a mediator, you're looking for a mediator that's keeping you forward, acknowledging your situation, and also in a way calling out that other person without kind of really, putting the smack down on them. And that's what really kind of eventually gets the proceedings down to this sort of calm place where we can all now have conversations because we've moved through a lot of the emotions, we've moved through a lot of the BS, and now we can really focus on the issues. And I know that comes across, but again, my job is to move you forward. And if you don't like me at the end of the process, as long as I helped you avoid litigation, I'm okay with that, right? If I got you an agreement you both think is fair, you don't have to like me. I just want to help. I just want to do my job and help you. That's my only goal in life.
Those are such helpful tips that you've outlined. I really appreciate the way that you've structured that. And your third point really makes me think about in general with communication when we come against a friction point, right?
Hmm.
We can even think of it from a scientific standpoint. So, what do we do when something's not really going with what we understand to be the truth or what we understand to be the science? we do an experiment. We ask a question, right? We respond with curiosity. And I think there's so much power in connection in a setting where there's a lot of disconnection going on when we respond with curiosity. And I think that might be another way to frame your forward focus that you are trying to give people. Okay, this is where we are. Where do we want to be? How can we get there? Ask the
Right.
question and let them
Sure.
get creative because there is a way forward. There is always a way
There
forward. It
is.
may not be ideal, may not be exactly what you want, but is staying where you are what you want? No? Okay, let's get to work. And you're here to help
Right.
people, which I think is an incredible life's work to do.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. That's important to note that divorce is not a straight line. It's a circuitous path, and it's bumpy and it's rocky and it's curvy, and sometimes there's a bridge missing, right? You have to take a detour, and you think about it. It's not a straight line, but at the end of the day, you will get there, right? It's like as any of us who now, as I've moved out here to Southern California, know that it doesn't matter what time of day it is, you will encounter bumper to bumper traffic. When people told me that before I moved out here, I'm like, that's just a myth. That's something you see in the movies. It's a joke around Los Angeles. Or no, you want to go to the supermarket to get something for dinner, plan on 2 hours, even though it's a mile away. Like, really, it's just fascinating. But that's how divorce can be as well, as that and if you prepare yourself for it, you say, look, and I do remind people of this, and our clients tend to be married like 20 years. My background, we tend to get complex cases, right? Financial guy, you get the people with the stock options and the business owners and the high net worth clients. But those folks have been married usually like 20 years, 25 years. And then they come in and they're like, well, how long is this going to take? I'm like, time out. You've been married 25 years. This is going to take a little time to unwind, right? Now, it's not going to take 3 years like litigation, but it might take 3 to 6 months, right? Let's just take a deep breath and be prepared for that. I know you're in pain and you want to get out of it quickly, but also acknowledging, for listeners, if you are facing a divorce or you're thinking about a divorce, be prepared that it doesn't have to be a battle, but it will take some time. So get with that mindset. Then this way that allows you to make good decisions rather than decisions that are just like, I just want this over. Let's go, let's go. And as a good mediator will tell you, a good mediator, even though I'm neutral, it doesn't mean I just sit there and let things unfold. I will interject and I will say to someone, I'm like, listen, there'll be different levels as a mediator. You'll see, why don't you think about it? That's level one. I think the person's being rash. Maybe they just need to take a deep breath and then come back next time. Level two is, that's unusual. This is what I'll say. I've never really seen anything like that. Are you certain that you want to do this? Level three is, this really isn't sitting right with me. I really need you to speak to a lawyer about this because I'm uncomfortable with your decision. Now, it's weird, right? Because I rarely go there. But if you get into a situation where, as a human, forget being a mediator, as a human, you know that 25-year marriage, this person's a high school dropout, this person's a CFO, and the high school dropout says, I don't want alimony, and insists they don't because they're very proud, right? I don't need your money. I'm like, I'm going to ask you to speak to an attorney about this. And once you've done that, come back in the session because I can't tell them what to do, but someone else can. So that's my way of protecting them, right? So that's
Yeah.
part of it too, as you enter the mindset. Just be prepared to make good decisions and take the time to do so.
Practice patience, patience, patience. That really is the
Boy,
name of the game
it is.
in relationships. And when we are dismantling them, it all takes
Hmm.
time.
Yep.
And, I think I love what you focused on there because something when we're learning about how we interact with people who maybe don't have our best interest at heart, whether it's the
Hmm.
person who's trying to convince us to invest in the timeshare or someone we have a interpersonal relationship with on a deeper level who's trying to get you to sign something but not let you read the paper, right? From
Hmm.
one end of the spectrum to another, most of the decisions we make in life are not the kind of decisions that have to be made now with a lot of pressure and urgency. And so if you are with someone who is trying to activate your stress response to make you respond urgently, you
Right.
need someone like Joe in your corner to help you re-regulate
Hmm.
and understand that this divorce isn't going to happen in a heartbeat. The marriage lasted longer, and these major issues, they deserve your focused attention, not your, I'm in a state of fight or flight. I'm
Right.
pushed against a wall. What choice am I going to make? So if you're finding yourself in that situation, time to take a pause, I would imagine, very often. And if you're
Yeah.
finding you have a team that's even your team is putting you in that state, that's something to be mindful of because to make good decisions, you have to stay regulated. You just simply
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thoughtful decisions require time. Now, as a good mediator, you're going to know the difference between someone who says, I understand what my options are. I need some time to think about them and I'll get back to you versus someone who continues to change their mind. And that's either because A, they need more guidance than perhaps you're able to give them, or B, they're manipulating the process by just trying to diffuse, confuse, etc. That's an important distinction. You want people to feel comfortable to make decisions, but you also emphasize to them divorce decisions build on themselves. And you do need to lay some foundational, bricks as you know, or your book, you need to lay some foundational bricks before you can build the rest of that house. And that's part of what your job as the mediator is, to just gauge everybody's willingness and speed to move forward. Because some people want to get done ASAP. Some people need the time. You just need to be able to read that room, if you will. And as long as they're making progress, right? Progress necessarily just might mean we've had a good conversation and we've gotten some issues on the table. That's progress, right? Some folks, and I can say this, as a numbers guy, I'm analytical. There are some guys, like, we have clients who are lawyers, we have clients who are accountants, right? They're very action oriented. They're like, well, what's the settlement going to look like? We're going to know that by the end of today. I'm like, how was your weekend? We just got on the call. You're looking at your watch like, wow, okay, like, hey, slow down. So that's what you have to be aware of also as you enter the process. Don't let the other person's style drag you down the river, right? It's like you need to take your own time. And in any communication, right? One thing that lacks, I think silence can be a powerful tool, but it can also, unfortunately, create a lot of issues because sometimes when someone's quiet and someone's an aggressor, the aggressor will continue to talk and that'll trigger an argument. Whereas if
Hmm.
you're a person who's listening and you're a person who avoids is a conflict avoider, it is totally okay to say, listen, you know me, I'm not quick on my feet. I need a moment to think about this. I understand what my choices are. Can you give me a minute? And that really does also take the temperature of arguments and conversations down. So that's even for listeners. If you're just talking to anybody, buying a car, talking to your colleague, whatever it is, instead of sitting there silently and panicking like, oh crap, I don't know what to say, just say, you know what? Yeah, okay, cool. I understand what you want from me. Do you mind if I just take 5 to think about it? And can I get back to you by the end of the day? Whatever it is, right? Because some people, I happen to be quick on my feet because it's my job, right? I'm born and raised and bred to be a negotiator. But my wife, on the other hand, if you ask her what she wants on her pizza, that's a complete paralysis. Like, I don't know. What are the choices? Well, I don't know. You know what goes on pizza. Well, I don't really know. Can you list them all for me? And then can we talk about them? No, I don't. What do you want on your pizza? We have to order it, right? So when you get in that space, it creates conflict. So for us, like, great. I know we have to order a pizza at 5 o'clock. I'll let you know then if I want pepperoni, for example. Right? Silly example, but
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. Knowing yourself, knowing your communication style, and staying true to that and not joining someone in theirs if it's
right.
a bad fit for you. That's so wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up this amazing conversation that I'm so grateful that we were able to have with you, I want to ask you if you could tell each couple you work with one thing heading into mediation. And I know you said you have your projection that you
Preamble. Yeah,
have.
sure. Yeah.
But if you could say one thing to them heading into mediation, what would that one thing be?
It's pretty straightforward. It would be, if you think you're going to reach agreement or you don't think you're going to reach agreement, you're right. The choice is yours. So at the end of the day, the minute you walk in here, from the day we start, if you believe that you will come to agreement and you're willing to work cooperatively together to reach that goal, you absolutely will. I mean, okay, 5 people did, but that's drop in the bucket, right? But if you think you're not going to, you're also correct because you're going to find every reason not to. And I mean, I'm a great mediator, all, but as you can see, there's some people I just couldn't drag across the finish line. And that's because they didn't want to, or they didn't follow our process, and they were real outliers, didn't file taxes for 10 years. And I didn't find that out until most of the way into the mediation, like random stuff where you're like, gee, that would have been nice to know, even though I've asked you that question 5 times and you didn't answer it, but those kinds of cases. And so that's what I'd say to people. If you're going to go into this process, go in with the mindset that just because our marriage didn't work out, it doesn't mean we can't work together to have an amicable, peaceful, child-focused divorce and mediate and come to an agreement we both find fair, acknowledging that we have to give to get.
Joe, thank you so much. I
Oh,
really appreciate the work you do and your
great.
approach to it. So many of us go through divorce. As we said, upwards of
Yeah.
50% of marriages will
Yeah.
end in divorce, and it can have a significant impact on our health and our lives. So, having professionals involved in the process who approach divorce with empathy and help you refocus your attention on that forward motion can have such a positive impact on a difficult stage of life. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the important work you're
Thanks.
doing. And yeah, let's stay focused if you have children on what the children need, on resolving conflict and moving on and reclaiming our stories so we can start
Yeah,
building that beautiful future.
absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been really a great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Well, me too, Joe. How can our listeners learn more about what you do and learn more about the benefits of mediation and divorce and conflict resolution, as well as pursue your services if it's something that would be a good fit for them?
Yeah, certainly our website is the best. So our website is equitablemediation.com, not meditation. Be very careful, as we were talking about before we got on the air. I'm not a yoga instructor. It's equitablemediation.com. And if you go there, we've been blogging for 17 years now, probably before blogging was a thing. And our belief has always been education, education, education. We know it's a scary time. So we have a learning center, and you will find hundreds of articles on all kinds of divorce topics, everything from how to tell your spouse to how to keep a child focused, how to tell your kids, how to have an amicable divorce, how alimony works, all these things. If you happen to be in one of the 6 states, so we practice in Washington, California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. We also have state specific guides on how divorce works, as well as divorce checklists. So a 50-page free book that on how divorce works, a checklist of items and things how to prepare. We have video courses. Like, we really just want people to learn about divorce before they come in, because quite frankly, I'm just going to be very honest. An educated client is a good client for us. They come in with realistic expectations, knowing what they didn't know before. And so we want you to do that. So our learning center on our website is definitely the best way. We have a free information call. You can schedule a call with Cheryl. Um, Happy to talk to you if we can help in one of the 6 states we practice in. And again, it's all about, we know this is a difficult time and we want to be there for you. So the resources are free. Take us up on it. Listen to the podcasts I've been on. Listen, read the books, read all the guides, and definitely educate yourself. So get to the website, certainly is the best place.
That's amazing. We are certainly going to link the website and those resources in the show notes because, yes, we always say in our family, don't be scared, be prepared. And that's been my approach to everything
Right.
from medical school to helping my kids get ready for a test. Don't be scared, be prepared. And
Love it.
so, in a time where you're feeling out of control, utilizing these resources is a small step and reclaiming your sense of control. Thank you again, Joe, for being on the show. This has been wonderful. And I want to thank our storytellers too for being here, for sharing your time. We appreciate you being here. And we would love to hear your takeaways from this week's show. Please share it with someone who you think would love this discussion and learn from it too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Talks with Dr. Shafer, where you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss any of the inspiring and informative episodes we have coming up. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.